plants. So we've named the three big ones: Amanita muscaria, the fairy tale mushroom, the mushroom which shows up in the books that the children read, the fairy tale books. The psilocybin mushrooms, which were lightly relating to the Smurfs, and the morning glory species, which is the conch shell. And also in the East Indies, no referral here to the East Indies Company, that's to be discussed next. In the East Indies, it was known as the unicorn. So, the unicorn has that magical horn, that spiral horn, and we'll talk about that as we get into the 6,000 stepping stones of 6,000 years and stepping stone history as they relate to Entheogenta. So a couple others besides these big names are wine, which is traditionally referred to as wine and spirits. We all know that wine has the ability to transport people from a humdrum spirit to a jubilant and perhaps overflowing state of mind. The tongue does spill forward much information under the influence of wine, and the Greeks referred to it as in vino es veritas, in wine is truth. So wine and spirits are associated. Another small player, a minor player, is opium. The opium poppy's symbol in universal history, in religion, is the acanthia leaf and the cobra. So the acanthia leaf is a non-medical plant, or its medical properties do not give it proper reasoning for its placement that it has in religious history. But that's a nice cover. It's a exoteric, for the masses revelation, when underneath that it's really the opium poppy that's being represented. We just call it the acanthia leaf. Alright, so those are the major players, and what's unique about these major players is that they are universally known, especially the conch shell, the morning glory, and the scallop shell, the psilocybin mushrooms, but also the cobra in the form of the acanthia shows up in much of the artwork. So opium is known in the East, and it's known in the West, in Europe, with the same symbols. It also shows up as the conch shell in Mesoamerica for the morning glory. So what does that mean? What that means is it argues for a universal spirituality. It argues for a pre-flood reality, a Atlantis, or a Pangea, as the scientists call it, when all the continents were one. Because when they're all broken apart, the symbols are still referring to the same psychedelics or ministering spirits. So, let's continue to break this down. The Red Bull of the Mountain comes from the Aryan tradition. The Aryans were the people who came out of the north and invaded India, and we'll look at that in history in just a moment. But what I can tell you from the anthropological study of these medicines is that it was a group of people who are known even up into the present as the Siberian tribesmen who would herd reindeer. And in the herding of these reindeer, not hurting, but herding, like gathering together and moving them in a direction, they found that the reindeer would eat the Amanita muscaria, this big red mushroom with the white spots. It's got a stop sign-like quality to it. And when those reindeer ate this mushroom, they would become intoxicated. And so the herdsmen were overjoyed at this, because they would then kill the reindeer and eat the reindeer, and the reindeer's meat contained this psychotropic plant. So they would reach states of consciousness that are not normally available to them through the eating of the reindeer. So what we get from this, and David Aurora, who wrote the book Mushrooms Demystified, has clarified this in an article. written in at the local newspaper of Santa Cruz, the Sentinel. I believe it was 1993. And he showed how Santa Claus, the big red guy with the white spots who gets on the sleigh and rides through the sky with the red-nosed reindeer, that all ties back into the use of this big red mushroom by the Siberian tribesmen. It also ties into history, and we'll get into it, that the consumption of urine is another way of passing this psychoactive drug through to the next person. A rather disgusting practice, but nevertheless worthy of understanding, because historically it has merit. It happens. It still happens to this day as far as we know. But in the 40s and 50s there are records of this practice happening. So that's the Amentum muscaria. I've talked a little bit about psilocybin and the Norwegian Smurf series with the alchemists who are trying to take this sacrament and turn it into gold. More on the history, you'll see that the Bodhi tree, the tree of enlightenment, under which Buddha reached enlightenment, is shaped in the exact, as you can see here, in the exact shape of a golden capped psilocybin mushroom. So there's certainly a lot to that. And you can also see here, as we step down into the morning glory, that the morning glory was also known by the Buddhist traditions in the East as the spiraling serpent over the Ajna chakra, or third eye. And you can notice that the Buddhist eyes here are not so friendly or enlightened. They're not even inviting. They look threatening and angry. Okay, well, that's an overview of the major and minor players of history. Let's take the next 30 minutes to look at the 6,000 years of human history since the flood. The 6,000 years of history really can be understood because of the universality of these symbols which represent the psilocybin mushroom, as well as the morning glory. Is it true that this symbol of the conch shell existed among the Maya, the Aztec, and the Olmec, and also exists among the Hindi and the Buddhist traditions? You bet it is. Look, here's the symbolism in both cultures. The feathered serpent symbol on the left here, and the symbol of the caste system denoted by different colored conch shells. And look here, this conch shell has the symbol of the morning glory. Now let's go to the statue of Xochipilli so you can see Xochipilli here, and this is the morning glory tendril. See, the morning glory cannot stand upright in and of itself because it has no strength, just as described in certain ancient books. This snake-like plant has fallen flat upon its face and must crawl in the dust until it finds a host that it can crawl up. So we have the tradition of symbolism, which is cultural universal, found on both continents. Now that can argue for a universal spirituality, and it certainly does, but it also argues for a scientific state of Pangea, a unified continent on which the terracotta that we all firmly believe in was unified as one. This is also known as the pre-deluge state of Atlantis. Now, if a flood occurred, and most people whose history goes back that far does record a universal flood, then we have two major descriptions of this universal flood. One is the flood described by the Hebrews, the flood of Noah. The other is the flood described by the Babylonians, which is the flood of Gilgamesh. The clay tablets that were found in Babylon describe this flood. So, let's defer to the archaeological scientific deposits of the Ark found in the mountains of Iraq here. Now these mountains are where the Bible says that we should find the Ark, and it turns out there's a